But here we are at the CAP Ideas Conference, proving once again that Democrats are the party of ideas, lots of ideas. That's what we've been proving all day long. Medicare for all, universal child care, debt-free college, criminal justice reform, immigration reform, gun reform, invest in clean energy, expand Social Security, rebuild our infrastructure, break up the banks, bring back the unions, guarantee everybody who wants to work a job that pays a living wage. Dozens and dozens of truly great ideas. And we are here sharing great ideas because we want to build a better country. That's what drew most of us to public service. I'm one of those people who never thought that I would be an elected official. I grew up out in Oklahoma on the ragged edge of the middle class. My daddy had a lot of jobs. He ended up as a janitor. My mother worked a minimum wage job at Sears. And me, I married at 19, dropped out of school, commuter college, babies, divorce, remarriage. But I grew up in an America that believed in opportunity. And I am here today, the daughter of a janitor who got to be a public school teacher, a law professor, and a United States senator, because America invested in kids like me. I ran for public office because I am grateful down to my toes. And I am grateful for the opportunities that were given to me. And I am deeply determined that America be a country that gives opportunities not just to some of its children, but to all of its children. And that's what the ideas that we're talking about today are all about. But let's face it, great ideas aren't enough. The sad truth is that most of these ideas won't go anywhere until we deal with the defining crisis of this moment in our history. Our democracy itself, the process by which we turn great ideas into real, tangible progress for the American people, that democracy is crumbling around us. And I'm not saying that to whine. I'm saying it because until we face this crisis head on, we will never be able to build the future that the American people deserve. So today, I want to talk about this crisis in our democracy and about what we as Democrats need to do about it. In 2016, nearly 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton than for Donald Trump. But Trump took the presidency. That is not exactly the sign of a healthy democracy. Democracy hangs on the idea that whoever gets the most votes wins. That's the central starting point, and it's worth repeating every single day. But democracy means a whole lot more than that. In a real democracy, even the most powerful elected officials in our country are still accountable to the public. We have a whole host of laws, rules, standards, traditions that we've instituted over time to provide that basic accountability in democracy. But this president, he believes he's above all of them. When he refuses to release his tax returns, when he turns agencies over to the corporate interests that they're supposed to regulate, when the people he appoints are allowed to sell influence, when he attacks a free press and the rule of law, in every case, he doesn't just undermine our sense of decency. He undermines the integrity of our democratic institutions. He declares that government is no longer a servant of the people, but is instead just another rich man's toy. And where is Congress while this goes on? Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, they're happy to overlook all the chaos and all the corruption if it helps get their agenda passed. In fact, they are willing to aid and abet the destruction of our democratic process to get their way. They don't mind the daily distraction because they know that their agenda does not reflect the will of the people. It's designed to help only a handful of billionaires and big corporations. Everyone else gets left in the dirt. And here's the kicker. In a democracy, the people always hold the trump card. No pun intended. When a president or Congress misuses the power that they win in one election, the people can vote them out in the next one. But this president and this Republican leadership have tried to change that too. They've launched a systematic campaign that includes everything from suppressing minority voting to welcoming foreign interference to undermining the census. And why not? Because if they can ignore the democratic norms on things like emoluments and congressional oversight and the legislative process and get away with it, why not just go ahead and mess with the elections themselves? Now, a lot of folks say Democrats shouldn't get distracted by that stuff. Inside baseball, they say. Process issues, they say. No one cares, they say. I disagree. Already, some experts are projecting that, thanks to gerrymandering, for Democrats to take back the majority in the House this November, we will have to win by 6, 7, or 8% of the votes cast just to pick up a simple majority. The 2018 election will be a massive uphill climb. And while we'd rather talk about great ideas, we can't climb that hill by ignoring the millions of Americans who are angry and scared about the damage this president and this Republican Party have done to our democracy. We can't ignore it, and we shouldn't want to ignore it. Our founders believed that our democracy was worth dying for. We must be willing to defend our democracy. We must call the attacks for what they are, un-American, and we must use whatever power we have to stop them. Let's start that process with a hard truth. This crisis did not begin when Donald Trump took office. Men like Trump only wind up in power when democracies are already decaying. As a party, we must now promise that if we are in charge, we will do more than just be wiser or more ethical stewards of a broken system. No, we have to promise real structural change, and we have to deliver on that promise the minute that we get the chance. And that starts with fixing our election marketplace. When it comes to elections, the principle should be every vote matters. If you can't get more American citizens to vote for you than the other guy or gal should be president. But it's bigger than that. Let's focus on voting itself. Politicians are supposed to compete over how many voters they can persuade, not how many citizens they can disqualify or demoralize. In states across this country, we need to stand up against voter suppression efforts like racist voter ID laws and restrictions on early voting. And we need to stand up for initiatives that make it easier to register and cast a ballot, from automatic registration to felon reenfranchisement. And we need to put an end to partisan gerrymandering. Yep. That means that we need to focus on winning back power in our state legislatures. And if you ask me, we need to be willing to take this to court again and again, however many times it takes. Eric Holder has been doing his part. Barack Obama, Terry McAuliffe, Nancy Pelosi, they're doing their part. And we all need to do our part. In March, I sent $5,000 to every single one of our 50 state parties to help them hire organizers and register voters, every single state. This week, I'm doubling down on the importance of our voters, state by state, and I want to turn up the heat on gerrymandering. I'm sending $175,000 to organizations on the front lines trying to win back our state legislatures and fight for fair redistricting. Yeah. Democrats believe in a fair fight, and making sure that districts aren't drawn to cut one party or the other out is a crucial first step. We can do this, and we must do this. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. Democrats should always, always be on the side of making it easier for citizens to vote. Voting is the beating heart of a democracy. And since we're at the Ideas Conference, here's an idea that we as a national party should get behind: a constitutional amendment establishing an unquestioned, unassailable, nationally recognized right to vote. Yep. So, first order of business, protect and expand the vote. But democracy isn't just about whether citizens get the leaders they choose. It's about whether they get the government they want. If we get to vote, but our elected officials don't actually work for us, then democracy breaks down. Everyone in this room knows exactly how it works. Year after year, election after election, people show up at the polls to kick the bums out, only to find out that no matter how many times they vote for change, too often it feels like Washington stays the same. Because too often, the bums who really run the show, the billionaires and the CEOs and the high-powered DC lobbyists, they aren't even on the ballot. The truth is, no matter what we do to fix our elections, we can't fix our democracy until we root out the corruption that allows money and power to be traded so freely in Washington. Overturning Citizens United would be a good start. Yeah. But let's not stop there. Let's go further. Let's dismantle the broken system that lets rich donors and giant companies undermine democracy by buying influence in Washington. Let me give you some ideas. No more financial conflicts of interest that make it impossible to tell whether agency heads, cabinet officials, or members of Congress are serving the American people or helping out their own bank accounts. Divest and report publicly, or don't take the job. Here's another one. No more secret multi-million-dollar deals that allow cronies to take a so-called leave of absence to serve in government and help out their old employers along the way. And one more. No more powerful politicians and government officials trading on their public service by cashing out as high-powered lobbyists after they leave office. How about a lifetime ban on lobbying for anyone who serves as a president, senator, representative, cabinet secretary, or agency head? A lifetime ban. The honor of service should be enough without the chance to sell access to your former colleagues in Washington. So that's the second part. Make our government more accountable to voters by getting rid of the incentives to work for anyone other than the voters who sent us here. And here's the third part. Rebuild our ability to come together. Democracy works best when we're all part of the same enterprise. Democracy works best when no one is so powerless that their voice doesn't matter, and no one is so powerful that they don't have to listen. Democracy works best when, win or lose, we keep coming back to the table. But that sense of shared purpose is breaking down. Look, I get it. We are a diverse nation, and there's a lot that we don't agree on. But there is so much more that we need to figure out. Rising healthcare costs, a changing climate, the cost of college, trade, so much to work on that will affect our future. And this democracy can't do that when so many people across party lines retreat to their own corners and view each other with suspicion and resentment. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not one of those Democrats who thinks we ought to throw working people under the bus every now and again just so we can show up at some bill signing and brag about what deal makers we are. The truth is, democracy works best when those of us who are in the fight are not afraid to stand up for what we believe in and even throw a punch once in a while, a verbal punch once in a while. But the debates I see happening around me in Washington these days, they aren't real. Most of them are just for show. The real deals get cut behind closed doors, like the $1.5 trillion tax bill, drafted in secrecy and rammed through without so much as a single public hearing, let alone a real debate. And the debates we actually do have are plagued with misinformation, which is another part of the problem. The President of the United States lies for sport and gets away with it. Meanwhile, Russia launches an information warfare campaign against our democracy and also gets away with it. But once again, democracy and disinformation don't thrive in a healthy democracy. That stuff only works when we've already stopped listening to each other. It only works when we're already sitting in isolated bubbles, complaining to people who agree with us about all those people who don't agree with us. Now, I know an isolated bubble can actually feel pretty good when some of the loudest voices on the other side litter their rhetoric with racism and misogyny. People who seek to belittle and demean our fellow Americans leave no room for honest debate or even for real conversation. I get that. But come on, folks, we're Democrats. And that means, above all else, we believe in a community. We believe in decency. We believe in what we build together. And the day that we stop talking to and stop listening to 63 million Americans, that's the day we should pack it up and go home. Isolation is not the answer for a Democratic Party that wants to take back power, and not for Democrats who want to see this country function again. In the end, our job as a party is to win elections, but that's just the starting point. Our bigger job is to help America fulfill the promise of democracy itself, the promise that this is a country where everybody gets a chance, no matter who you are, where you came from, where you live, or what you think about the issues of the day. I made it in this country because America gave me a chance. I ran for the Senate because I want the next daughter of a janitor to have that same chance, the chance to grow up in an America full of possibilities. That is the true promise of our democracy. It is a promise worth fighting to keep. And I promise you, I'm in this fight all the way. Thank you. Thank you.